Senior Minister of State, Dr. China.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank the members, Ms. Joan Pereira, Ms. Sylvia Lim, Mr. Melvin Yong and Mr. Lewis Ng for their support for the Transport Safety Investigations Bill. This arena of transport safety investigations is very specialized. It's a fairly unique process. It's been tested in practice. It has an international application. It arose really from our obligations under some international treaties, ICAO and IMO. This bill brings together the work that has been already ongoing. The TSIB was administratively created in August of 2016 coming out of the Air Accident Investigation Bureau. They've been doing the work already. But this bill will facilitate that work. It brings it together under one legislative framework. And it enables the investigators to effectively perform their safety functions, improve transport safety, and be in accord with international practices as well as our international agreements under one legislative framework. Many countries have a similar multimodal transport investigation agency: Australia, Canada, Japan, Korea, the US. Having a multimodal transport safety investigation agency allows the cross-sharing of best practices and resources. While there is a need for domain-specific industry experience, engineering experience, safety operation experience, there is a significant amount of cross-sharing in terms of legal practices, cross-border issues, and how one interfaces with other government agencies, among other things. So there's a need for deep specialization, aviation experts, maritime experts, subsequently rail experts, but there's also a need to bring them together administratively, and the experience from overseas shows that this works. It also allows the deepening of the investigation expertise, the sort of human factors, for example, and system factors. But the TSIB is staffed with really very experienced and competent investigators, currently with aviation and maritime industry experience. So this industry experience is really something very significant. While they have been in industry, they have had experience of operating some of these safety issues, of designing safety policies within their agency, within their commercial organization. And so they bring to bear, when they come and work under the TSIB, all of those years of experience. The director has 20 years of experience and is a fairly senior person. And it is that level of expertise that we will need to have. Some of the members asked about training and capability development. The investigators attend both local as well as foreign training courses to update their knowledge of transport systems, to sharpen the investigation capabilities. And the training is ongoing. It is not just merely at the point of entry at TSIB. They go on attachments with TSIB's counterparts locally and overseas. Indeed, we are able and have brought in both volunteer investigators as well as appointed overseas experts, depending on the nature of the incident and the case that's being investigated. A whole series of resources will be brought together depending on what's needed. The number of people, however, that we need here in Singapore in order to do this, while they are very talented and have a deep expertise, it's probably not a number that will justify a singular training center. So that's not something that we are currently planning on. We are planning to build up our rail safety investigation capabilities over the next 2 years through the recruitment and training of rail safety investigators. We are not looking to do this by transferring people across different parts of government, because these types of capabilities will be needed in other agencies and in other entities, because there is an ongoing need for investigations for disciplinary processes, enforcement and regulation and so forth. So we want to build up a separate arm of capability. This objective of the TSIB is really just to focus on that safety standards, looking at the causes, drawing safety lessons, preventing recurrence. As has been noted, we've included this provision for TSIB to be activated in the future to investigate incidents involving LTA contracted bus services. The questions was raised about why not all buses, why not all major incidents. So again, I would reiterate, there are plenty of other organizations and agencies that can investigate. The police, LTA itself can conduct an investigation. The Minister of Transport can also convene committees and commissions of inquiry for incidents. And so the the constitution, by constituting TSIB, it's not that all investigations will only happen under the remit of TSIB. It is a very specific and particular type of investigation that will happen under TSIB, and all the other agencies that can continue to investigate people, investigate incidences and systems will continue to have that opportunity to do so. So the reason why we've looked at that provision specifically for LTA contracted bus services. Firstly, it's about the systems associated with it. So you need something which is a fairly complex system to begin with organizationally to justify this type of investigation. Secondly, ordinary road accidents usually are about human error, and the opportunity is there for traffic police as well as LTA to investigate. But in this case, we wanted something apart from LTA to investigate LTA contracted services. I hope that answers the members' questions. This independent assessment of safety issues and recommendations would run in parallel to any potential traffic police investigation. The TSIB bill does provide for the investigation of incidents involving unmanned aircraft, unmanned vessels, unmanned rail vehicles, and if at the Minister's direction in the future, unmanned buses which operate on services contracted by LTA. There were a number of questions about military and exemptions. This is a requirement under international agreements that the transport safety investigations are not conducted into occurrences involving only military and state vessels. So as part of that international agreement, we've had to then put in that exemption clause. But we do have jurisdiction to investigate if the occurrence is between one of these exempt vehicles and one which is not, one of the civilian vehicles. One of the members asked about what are the circumstances in which the commanding officers or the directors of other agencies. I think that's an issue for them to answer. TSIB is available as a pool of resources and expertise that's there. So depending on what the needs are of the unit or the team or the agency where this incident happened, if there is a need for this particular type of safety investigation, then we are a resource to be called upon by the SAF or SCDF. But there are other routes for these incidences to be investigated as well. If the issue involving a military aircraft involves information that is relevant for national security, there are already protocols in place, and that came out of the experience that the Air Accident Investigation Bureau had working together with RSAF. So protocols have been developed, and they will exist across all these different interagency boundaries to deal with issues around sensitive information to allow these investigations to proceed. Members brought up the issue of the exemption that the Minister for Transport can order through the Gazette. This will only be exercised in highly exceptional cases, and it will not be taken lightly. This exemption arises from the fact that there is an international requirement for the provisions of the bill, and those international requirements provide TSIB with a significant amount of powers, requirement for reports to be made public. And we do want to make sure that when it is necessary from a national interest, that certain vehicles can be exempted from those provisions. It will be done through an order in the Gazette, and it will not be taken lightly. In the past 2 years, the TSIB has initiated an average of 17 investigations into aviation and marine incidences per year, and each investigation takes approximately 1 year to complete. TSIB institutes its own investigations. There is no transfer of investigations from other agencies, and there will not be as these new domains are investigated. These will be independent and separate investigations. Mr. Ng asked about the detention of vehicles, Clause 30, which empowers the director to detain a transport vehicle for the reasons given. There is no express cap on the duration of detention. Clause 30, paragraph 5, explicitly states that the director must not detain a transport vehicle under this section for longer than is necessary and reasonable to exercise any other powers under this Act. The transport vehicle can only be detained for both what is necessary and reasonable to facilitate the investigations. And so TSIB will be mindful not to detain these vehicles for longer than necessary. With respect to the issue of costs, Today already, air incident investigation costs and expenses are recovered from owners and operators whose aircraft are the subject of investigation. So Clause 18 is really looking for parity across a number of domains just to make sure that the same approach and same treatment is applied. The examples of the types of costs was asked, and for example, the cost of conducting specialized tests, recovering and storing the wreckage, as well as the sort of administrative and operational overheads of conducting the investigation. Ms. Lim in particular asked about the information that will be obtained by TSIB in the course of an investigation. So the requirement is that the information is used solely for the purpose of improving transport safety. That's why the bill is crafted in the way it is, in order to maintain that opportunity to have a free flow of information without the fear that the persons giving that information will be penalized. And so, in order to do so, the TSIB staff, as well as former staff who are involved, need to be distanced from judicial proceedings. They cannot be compelled to give evidence in civil or criminal proceedings related to that incident. Further to that, some information, such as onboard recording information, cannot be disclosed. And this is the international practice that's there. The sort of final part of this component is that the investigation report is inadmissible as evidence in courts and proceedings, with the exception of the coroner's inquiry. And that's to stay consistent with the fundamental purpose of these transport safety investigations. The reason why the coroner's inquiry has an exception made for it is because the purpose of the coroner's inquiry is to the cause and circumstances connected with the death without necessarily framing a finding as to determine any question of criminal, civil or disciplinary liability. However, this barrier against disclosure is not absolute. Under Clause 43, Paragraph 4, the High Court may order the disclosure of the restricted information if it is satisfied that this is necessary. But ultimately, it is the coroner's prerogative to decide whether it's necessary to wait for the conclusion of a TSIB investigation before making a decision about the cause of death, a verdict on the cause. This is not under TSIB's remit. It will be up to the coroner to decide, and the coroner will be aware that this investigation is happening, and the coroner will have to make that decision. There are issues with respect to the coordination of multiple investigations from multiple agencies, and so the agencies involved have developed standard operating procedures to make sure that they adhere to their own regulatory framework as well as to allow the investigation to proceed. If there is sharing of information, it is done within the regulatory and legal frameworks for each investigation and for each agency. Indeed, during the course of the investigation, the TSIB will engage with the parties concerned to deliberate the information collected, to analyze the contributing factors, and to try to make some preliminary recommendations. But ultimately, the drafting and the report is by TSIB. The TSIB has to take full responsibility for those recommendations and stand by them. So where there is, for example, conflicting information that's coming in, TSIB has to make the decision about what will be their recommendations and justify it in their report. Ms. Lim asked particularly about the issue of making the draft report available. This is a practice that has been happening in the aviation industry, particularly internationally, and the commercial players see value in this because it increases public confidence in the safety of the processes, their processes, as well as the international agreements. And it should be seen not as a vetting of the final report, but as a completion of the fact-finding and analysis of the information that's there. How industry experts would interpret what has happened to this point so far. But ultimately, the positioning of where TSIB sits within the ministry, its protections under the law, and the structure of their operations as regulated by this bill give it that independence from commercial interests. I'm sure there will be an attempt to put across vested interests and lobbying and so on and so forth, but it is precisely because of that that we need to ensure that there are protections for the director of TSIB and the officers of TSIB to have that independence when they issue their recommendations in their final report. Ms. Pereira asked about the penalty. This is not the penalty for a safety lapse. This is not a penalty for a safety lapse. This is the penalty for failing to administratively cooperate with the TSIB, not necessarily as a punitive penalty following a safety lapse or an incident. And that matter is something not for TSIB to determine, but for the police or for the agencies or the regulators to investigate and determine as needed. Mr. Deputy Speaker, once again I thank the members for supporting this bill and the good work that our TSIB officers do, and for bringing up these very key and important issues in the operations of both the maritime, air and in the future rail sectors. I beg to move, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Transport Safety Investigations Bill.
Committee stage what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill.
The question is that Parliament will immediately resolve itself into a committee on the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clauses 1 to 57 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Bill to be reported. Senior Minister of State, Dr. Janil.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to report that the bill has been considered in committee and agreed to without amendment.
Third reading what day?
Now, sir, I beg to move that the bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Transport Safety Investigations Bill.